Wonderful. Okay, welcome everyone to the Tempe City Council Work Study Session virtual meeting for Thursday, February 17th, 2022. The time is now 4:02 p.m. Due to concerns over COVID-19 exposure, the city has implemented measures to protect our community, including the closing of council chambers and limiting public attendance to electronic means only. Members of the public may view the live meeting proceedings on Tempe Channel 11 or at tempe.gov/Tempe11, or they may attend the meeting virtually through Cisco WebEx events by visiting tempe.gov/clerk for more information. Item number 1 is the call to the audience. The City Council welcomes public comment at this time for items listed under Section 2, issue review session items, and Section 4, committee of the whole items on this work study session agenda. There is a 3-minute time limit per speaker. Madam Clerk, I will turn to you to see if any speaker or comment cards were received from the public regarding any agenda items.
Mayor, we did receive a number of cards. Our live speakers don't seem to be logged in yet, so with your approval, I'll read the cards that were submitted to be read into the record first.
That sounds good.
Okay, first card comes from John Burgess. He's writing in reference agenda item 2F as in Frank, Climate Action Plan. John writes, Tempe must prioritize climate justice initiatives as well as creating a more sustainable future for the citizens of Tempe. As a young person, the climate crisis is something that worries me greatly. Tempe should prioritize climate policy and create a climate action plan that prioritizes a sustainable future for the citizens of Tempe and tomorrow. Next item comes from David Sokolowski, and he writes in reference agenda item 2C as in Charlie, the capital improvement plan. David writes, Tempe residents have been pleading with the city to provide adequate shade and seating at bus stops because the heat can be so extreme. Transit riders like myself have low carbon footprints, but we have a huge burden to wait for the bus for long periods of time. It's going to become even more difficult in the future as the frequency and intensity of heat waves increases. Tempe's performance measures are to reach an 80% transportation satisfaction rating by 2024. Half our bus stops do not provide any shade or seating, and our current shelters do not provide adequate shade or seating. Our current shelters may have been adequate 30 years ago, but not by our current standards, and certainly not 20 to 30 years in the future. It seems like the city has neglected to take the appropriate steps to achieve the desired outcome. What actions will the city take to achieve its target of an 80% transportation satisfaction rating by 2024? Next item comes from Elizabeth Betcha. She writes in reference agenda item 2F as in Frank, climate change. Elizabeth wrote, the time is now to take action to both mitigate and prepare our citizens and wildlife for future climate events. The folks belonging to the CCLIP are prepared to implement actions that help in meeting the City of Tempe's Climate Action Plan. Is there a date you can commit to in order to discuss the implementation of the CCLIP plan? What are your timelines to implement goals for the CAP? Last card I have to read comes from Wendy Richmond Conley, and she's also writing in reference agenda item 2F as in Frank, Climate Action Plan. Wendy writes, please support all budget matters pertaining to enacting the Climate Action Plan. Thank you. Mayor, and we'll take a quick look in the audience and see if any of our live speakers are in attendance yet.
Okay, sounds good.
I don't see any, Carla.
Okay. All right.
Mayor,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say on my end, it appears none of them are present in the audience at this time.
Okay, so let's do this then. Let's, in order to keep the meeting moving, we can come back to them when the item comes up on the agenda. But what I would like to do is take the agenda slightly out of order this evening because we have an outside speaker for item 2B, which is Streetscape and Transportation Enhancement Program, which is known as the STEP Manual. And I'm going to see if Marilyn DeRosa and Kathy Hollow and Randy Dittburner are available.
Hello.
Hi, Marilyn.
Hi there. You caught me off guard. I apologize. Okay. I won't take long. Okay. I'm Marilyn DeRosa. I'm the Director of the Engineering and Transportation Department, and we're here tonight to talk about revisions to the city's neighborhood traffic calming program. The program has been active since about 2008. It's described in the STEP manual and allows neighborhoods to petition the city to install traffic calming features ranging from speed humps to street closures and everything in between in their neighborhoods. Council has heard from the neighborhoods, however, that the manual is a little clunky, and based on that feedback, Council directed staff to revise the manual to make it a little more user-friendly. Staff has been working for over a year on just that. Kathy Hollow, our city traffic engineer, and Randy Dittberner, our consultant with Lee Engineers, have been guiding the process and brought suggested revisions to Council last October. At that presentation, Council was largely supportive of the changes with the exception of three things. Number one, Council asked us to return with a more comprehensive analysis of peer city programs. Number two, to be more clear, they wanted us to more, you guys wanted me to us to more clearly define the role of property owners versus renters in the approval process. And number three, to more thoroughly evaluate the approval percentages necessary to install a device or feature. So Kathy and Randy are back tonight to share the results of that follow-up work, including some revised program recommendations, and to ask for your support in transitioning the program to the newly revised manual. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kathy and Randy.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. As Marilyn said, we're back. We're here to present a little bit of follow-up on the STEP manual update. So just to review here, this item is tied to the performance measure, quality of life performance measure 3.26 to achieve a multimodal transportation system where residents on local streets can walk, bike, or use public transit and then meet their needs. This evening, we are going to just briefly touch on the background of the program, and then, as Marilyn mentioned, go into the peer city data that we found and respond to the two questions that came up during the October 2021 council meeting. So here's the manual, and you've probably all seen it or maybe have looked at it one time. And the real goal of this was so that we have staff has a consistent process to follow when establishing traffic mitigation in neighborhoods, and that the process is clear to the residents as well. In doing this project, we had extensive, in conjunction with neighborhood services, we had extensive outreach, including, in addition to the council meetings, we had stakeholder meetings, we had public meetings, and then we've also met with both the Neighborhood Advisory Commission and the Transportation Commission twice. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Randy to present what we have found.
Kathy, thanks very much. I'm Randy Dittberner with Lee Engineering, and the city brought us on board to help update the STEP manual and kind of bring it up to current standards. In so doing, we looked at several different peer agencies. Many of these we talked about when we met back in October, but we did add several to this list in response to comments from council and others, and in particular El Paso, Berkeley, and Lansing, our new cities that we added to the list and investigated. So we'll talk about results of peer cities as we go through the presentation. In October, we did present a draft new traffic calming guide. And as Marilyn said, there are a few items that we want to take a little bit closer look at. But several items we talked about last year that really seemed like they got fairly good support from the council and other stakeholders. And just a few highlights of those. We are proposing to include speed cushions. We're proposing to include qualifications so that only certain streets would be eligible for traffic calming devices. The approval process would be city-led rather than neighborhood-led. That we proposed a process for dealing with non-resident, or rather non-responsive households, and we offered a mechanism for city staff to use their professional judgment to make sure that the process works well for neighborhoods. So just a couple of items that we wanted to go back and take a second look at in response to your comments back in October. And one has to do with rental properties. This is the slide we showed back in October. And on the left side shows what happens in the existing step manual, which is there really isn't any guidance on whether people who own or people who rent are the ones who can speak on behalf of the parcel for traffic calming devices. In 2021, we proposed that either the renter or the owner may sign for single-family homes, and either the owner or the manager for multifamily. But we've gone back and looked a little bit closer at this issue and have a new proposal to present to you here today. So first, talking about the peer agencies, of these 14 peer agencies that we looked at, there was a bit of a mix in terms of who allowed owners to sign, who allowed renters to sign, and who has a slightly different process. As you can see, there were about 7 of the 14 agencies that allow owners to sign and allow owners to sign but overrule renters or have some other policy that kind of favors owners. But there were 5 agencies that allowed owners or renters to sign petitions. And this is a list of kind of how those agencies shake out. As I said, the bulk allow either the owners or the renters to sign petitions. If only the owners may sign, I think there's the fear that renters may feel like their voices are not welcome. And it is also true that some non-resident owners may not be aware of local traffic issues, particularly those who may live out of state or out of the country, may not be as aware as local residents of what the situation is in the neighborhoods. If owners and renters may sign, then there's the chance that they may disagree. And so there needs to be a way to resolve those conflicts. And then there's also this issue of whether owners and renters may vote. These votes may nullify each other, but they would continue to count either way. So our recommendation dealing with owners and renters is kind of a change in the paradigm that we talked about last time. And in particular, we're proposing that everyone in the study area is eligible to vote on a traffic calming plan, both people who rent and people who own. Anyone who wants to cast a ballot is welcome to cast a ballot, and all votes that are received by the city would be weighted equally. So this kind of helps to resolve the issues, some of the issues that we talked about last time with regard to the conflict resolution process, because there really is no need to resolve a conflict between an owner and a renter. They both cast their votes. The votes are all counted and weighted equally. The second issue that we wanted to dig into a little bit more deals with the thresholds for project approval. And again, this is the slide we showed back in 2021. The existing step manual has this 3-tier approval process that requires 100% support adjacent to a device, 75% support on the primary street on which the device is located, and at least 51% support on other streets that might have their access affected. In 2021, we proposed to retain that same 3-tier system and only change the middle tier support percentage to 70% from 75%. But again, we've gone back and taken a second look at the thresholds and again have something new to share with you tonight for review. First, talking about peer agencies, we looked at this slide talks about how peer agencies deal with adjacent parcels, those that are immediately adjacent to a traffic calming device. And what we found is of 12 agencies that responded, 5 of them do require the 100% support, and 1 more has language that says they strongly seek 100% support. And 3 more in addition, on the bottom here, don't require 100% support, but will avoid parcels that are opposed to a traffic calming device. So it's a very similar outcome in that they're all trying to make sure that traffic calming devices go only in front of parcels that are supportive. So of the 12, 9 had some measure of wanting to try to get that 100% support. And here is how those agencies shake out. It is, again, mostly the the agencies in the Phoenix area that have the strict 100% requirement. But there are others outside of Phoenix that have that encouragement of 100%. This slide deals with support from other parcels, that is, parcels that are not immediately adjacent to a traffic calming device. And of the responding agencies, we found almost all require their petitioning to be between 60 and 75% support. Most of the Phoenix area agencies are in the 70 to 75% category. And as we move away from Phoenix, the percentages tend to drop a little bit into the 60 to 66% range. And there were a handful of agencies that use another process entirely that were not easily able to be categorized in one of these boxes. So looking at adjacent parcels, if we require 100% support from an adjacent parcel, then you can pretty much guarantee that no device is going to be opposed by that parcel. But it does make it harder for support to be achieved for the traffic calming plan. And as such, it's less likely that traffic calming would be installed. Conversely, if 100% support is not required, it makes it easier to obtain support, but you may find objections from adjacent households, and that could be a potential concern. Households may object because of loss of parking, or noise, or presence of signs or pavement markings, or other reasons that are specific to the device that is proposed. So our recommendation when it comes to percentage support is subdivided now into whether we're talking about small scale devices, and by small scale devices, we're talking about devices that typically can be moved. A speed cushion, for instance, is a street segment device that if a certain parcel opposes it, could be moved a parcel or two to one side or another, usually, to avoid that parcel that's in opposition. Chicanes also fall into that category. So for small scale devices, we're looking for 100% of votes to be in support. And again, going back to the issue of owners and renters, we're only considering parcels that vote. So if a parcel doesn't cast a vote, for whatever reason, they're not engaged or they're not interested, or traffic calming is not top of their mind, they're not considered as part of the approval process. But of the parcels that do vote, we're looking for 100% support from adjacent parcels. For other parcels that are not adjacent to a device, for small scale devices, we're looking for at least 70% of the votes to be in support. When it comes to large scale devices like diverters or street closures, those are often located at intersections, and it is much more difficult to move the devices to avoid a parcel that's opposed. And often the presence of that device at a particular intersection is critical to the overall performance of the traffic calming plan. So our proposal is not to require any particular level of support from adjacent parcels for large-scale devices, but rather focus only on the entire neighborhood. The entire study area would need to have at least 60% of votes in support for those large-scale devices. So let me turn it back over to Kathy just to wrap up.
Okay, so as Marilyn mentioned, we're here this evening, or this afternoon, asking for your support for these two final policy revisions. We do have support from the Neighborhood Advisory Commission and from the Transportation Commission. Once we have this support, our next steps will be to actually finalize the changes to the manual and then put it to use and monitor its use as we continue with neighborhood traffic mitigation. So with that, I'll open it to questions or comments from the council.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the presentation. Really appreciate it. Council, I will look for hands for any comments. I see Councilmember Cubey.
Thanks so much, Mayor. I appreciate it. And thanks for all the hard work. I really appreciate you going back and looking at college towns and university towns. I think that's really important as a comparison. And so just, from my point of view, I totally agree with recommendation 1, 60% approval for large scale plans and no threshold on homes adjacent. I think that's really in line with other university towns, and so I appreciate that. But let's see, recommendation 2, I just think it's a little too broad. I think each parcel should have one vote. And if the owner votes one way and the renter votes the opposite, they can come to some kind of consensus. If they can't, the owner's vote probably should be the one that counts. And if they both agree, not a problem. But I think there should only be one vote for a parcel. And if the owner doesn't apply and the city staff makes every effort to contact them, as you always do, then as we were saying, the vote would be an automatic yes. Because the way you have it now with everyone who votes counts, there could be some odd scenarios. And also we don't list it to an age. So if there's a number of children in the house, they get extra votes. It doesn't seem to make sense. But think about somebody, a landlord who owns 5 houses in the neighborhood. I mean, this is common, right? We know there's some houses, there's some renters, landlords that own a bunch of houses in that area of Maple Ash. And let's say they have 4 people in each house, then there could be 20 votes against a project rather than, 5 votes if there were 5 parcels. And so, I just think that could be problematic because a number of the units have a lot of people living there, and it would be, I just think we'd run into problems. So I would recommend that the votes be 1 per parcel, and then the parcel comes to an agreement about what their vote is. And that's my recommendation. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you so much, Councilmember QB. Any other council members, additional comments or feedback?
Mayor, my hand's up.
Yes, Vice Mayor Keating.
Thank you much, Mr. Mayor. I really appreciate the presentation and all the different committees that you went through to get feedback and come back with, your recommendations. I did think it was funny you included Lansing in the peer cities. As someone from Lansing, I can tell you that Lansing is no peer of Tempe, but it is a college town, and I just thought it was kind of humorous because I spent my first 18 years there. I really appreciate your recommendations. I'm fine with what you're proposing. I understand what Councilmember Kuby is saying, but I do worry about, how do they come to consensus? And are we then, if it is then ultimately the owner of the property, are we, not taking into account the people that rent there? Because we know a lot of Tempe does rent. So, for me, I think you guys have done your homework. You clearly, came back with a very well thought out approach, and I'm happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Keating. Any other council members, further comments or questions?
Hi, Mayor, this is Doreen.
Yes, Councilmember Garland, please.
Hi, I was just wondering if they could could you just explain really quickly, it's on slide 20, the large scale device diverters. So what I think you were saying is that on that, for the large scale devices, you're looking for 60% of the total votes of the area, but not specifically, because you were saying this would be something that would be on a corner, possibly. Is that right? I just want to make sure I'm clear on that.
Yes, that's correct. A large-scale device is typically one located at an intersection, like a diverter or a street closure. That is, its location at the intersection is pretty important to the overall function of the entire traffic calming plan.
Okay, so the concern is making sure that closure or the change or anything that would be happening there, it affects all the people that are around it. So that's why you're looking at that 60% of the votes of the larger area.
Right, and I think the reason not to have a particular support percentage from adjacent parcels is that if one adjacent parcel happens to be opposed, it could jeopardize the entire neighborhood's traffic calming plan just because of this one, this one non-supportive household. So that's why we propose to look at the entire neighborhood rather than just the adjacent parcels.
Okay, I like your small scale device, the support from adjacent. I like that. I mean, as one person who's gone, I think I talked about this, knocking on doors, trying to get speed humps put in my neighborhood. That is a lot of work, but I like how you've broken it down here, so I appreciate it. So thank you so much for what you guys did. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Garland. Any of the council members' comments or questions? Okay, hearing none. I'm generally comfortable with these suggestions. I mean, I really appreciate all the homework that was done on this, and I do want to make sure, on one hand, I do, understand, folks who own their properties, but I think, as, Vice Mayor Keating said, one of my concerns is that we do have a lot of people who rent in our community. I mean, I myself being one of them, and I just want to make sure that, those voices are also kind of well represented in processes like this. And so, from my perspective, also, given the fact that you have the support from the Transportation Commission and the Neighborhood Advisory Commission, I'm comfortable supporting the recommendations as is. Any other council members, any other comments on this? Okay. So based on what I'm hearing, council, do we have sort of consensus at this point to go forward with the recommendations as listed on slide 20?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Okay. Sounds like we have consensus to move forward with these.
All right.
Thank you,
Thank
Mayor.
you. Appreciate you. Appreciate your attention this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. All right. Excellent. Next up here, and I'm going to try to go based on the items where we received public comment from residents. I'd like to go next to item 2F, Climate Action Plan Update and Municipal Climate Actions. That would be Braden Kay and Grace Kelly. And to that point, I should ask, Madam Clerk, I believe that a lot of the comments this evening were about the Climate Action Plan. Are any of those speakers currently in the queue?
We do have John Penry present. We can elevate him so he can speak.
Yes. Anyone who put in a card to speak on this item, I'd love to let them in now.
Karen, can you unmute John Penry?
Hello.
Yes. Hi, John.
Hey, how are you? Good afternoon, Mayor Woods. Thank you.
Absolutely. Good. Go for it. You've got 3 minutes to address the council. Please go ahead.
Okay, I'd like to do, with your permission, I'd also like my wife, she signed up, but we've only been able to connect with one system. So if she could go after me, that'd be okay. First off, Mayor Woods, Vice Mayor Keating, council members Garland, Kuby, and Navarro, thank you very much for allowing me time to speak with you this afternoon. We feel like this is a very important topic with the Tempe Climate Action Plan. I don't want to take up a lot of your time, but back in 2019, when the first Climate Action Plan came out, well, we started meeting on our own here in our neighborhood to come up with ideas about what we think we could help do with the city of Tempe and try to augment things and try to push things along a little bit. We're really excited about the Climate Action Plan, but we don't really feel like we feel that there is an adequate amount of resources being applied to it. And so we're asking you to apply more resources to the Climate Action Plan. One of the main things that we see is a weakness. You can see right now, SRP has already made an announcement to spend $1 billion to put a new power plant down south in Coolidge. For $1 billion, we could put batteries in 83,000 homes in Tempe and take care of a lot of our problems that way. I'm not asking for $1 billion, no. But we have been doing a lot of work to try to mitigate some of the costs and try to improve our own resiliency within our neighborhood. Our organization is named CLIP. It means Community Climate Livability Project, and we would like to have more opportunities to speak with you about this in the future. Thank you very much. If I can I pass it over to let my wife speak now?
Let me just double check really quickly, Madam Clerk. Would that be allowed, or is that just up to me?
Mayor, that's up to you. And if we can at least get his wife's name for the record.
Sure. Yep. If we can get your name for the record, you've got 3 minutes to address the council.
Thank you, everyone. This is Elizabeth Dietz. I go by Beth Dietz.
Hi, Beth.
Hi, how are you, Mayor Woods?
Good.
To everyone. So I'm going to reiterate a little bit of what John said. And I want to say, I wrote mine out, it's easier, so I'm just going to read what I said. So I support the Climate Action Plan, but not simply as a plan. The purpose of the Climate Action Plan is to address a very real existential problem, climate change. And it's simply not enough, and it's morally wrong, in my opinion, for the council just to approve the plan and receive the accolades of having a plan without putting resources and funding behind the plan to make it successful. And as a Tempe resident and member of CLIP, which John was referencing, I have walked around neighborhoods. I've met with teachers and with school staff and community, what do you call it? The community center staff. We've hosted members of our community, and everybody, well, not everybody, but the majority of the people that we talk to agree that climate change is one of the biggest issues, if not the biggest issues, facing our world in terms of the type of future our children will inherit and in terms of our future safety. So our community group, which we formed about 3 or 4 years ago, CLIP, we've developed a program that will meet the goals of the Climate Action Plan and that will help all members of the Tempe community to reduce their energy demand and carbon output. And as stated in the Climate Action Plan goals, the CLIP program will increase the supply of residential renewable energy and storage and reduce energy demand, provide financing to residents to meet these goals by using current federal grant money and loans, as well as private investment loans paid through water bills. It envisions a website for the program similar to what the Climate Action Plan has as a sustainability platform, and it provides for resilient energy hubs and individual residences rather than through community buildings, so that all residents will have safety in the event of an extreme heat situation where the grid may go down or because of fires. And it will be done through the financing of mini split air conditioners, runoff solar, and battery storage. So regardless of how the city addresses the Climate Action Plan, we
30
very
seconds
much
remaining.
are in favor of it, but we think that the city can do more than vote for a plan to address one of the biggest crises in the history of humanity, animals, and our planet, and that they can actually fund the plan with money that will make it successful.
Sounds good. Thank you, Beth. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank all of you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, do we have any other speakers on this item?
Mayor, it doesn't appear any of the other speakers are present, so you may move on.
Okay, given that, I will go ahead and call up Braden Kay and Grace Kelly to give the presentation about the 2002 Climate Action Plan update.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Really appreciate being here tonight to address you on our 2022 Climate Action Plan update. I'm here with Grace Kelly from the Engineering and Transportation Department. Next slide. We are here tonight to summarize the last 2 years of work on the 2022 Climate Action Plan update. We're sharing updated data on our municipal and carbon neutrality performance measures and recommendations for future policy programs, personnel, and infrastructure. Next slide. Our climate action work falls into our municipal work that supports reducing greenhouse gas emissions from city operations, which Grace will discuss, and our community action work geared towards working with residents and businesses on citywide greenhouse gas emissions from homes, businesses, industry, and all transportation within city limits, and our work on resilience to extreme heat. Next slide. We collected, next slide. We collected greenhouse gas emissions data from 2015 as part of our first climate action plan for both community and municipal emissions. And then also as part of that first plan, the Sustainability Commission recommended 12 actions and 4 highlight actions in the 2019 plan. And in this update, we are moving forward with 3 named highlight actions. Resilient energy hubs and resilient hubs for our energy focus area, transportation demand management and mobility hubs for our transportation focus area, and green codes and standards for our resilience to extreme heat focus area. Next slide. The Sustainability and Resilience Commission and residents involved in the Equity in Action program gave the Sustainability and Resilience Office clear advice that the 2022 Climate Action Update needed to have both process and products that reflect the voices and interests of Tempe residents and businesses. With that in mind, the office developed partnerships to support the creation of 4 agendas. The youth agenda, co-created with MIAC and Tempe young people, the business agenda, co-created with businesses and facilitated by the Tempe Chamber of Commerce and Local First Arizona, the neighborhood agenda, and the climate justice agenda, which you got to hear about last week, which was co-created with Unlimited Potential, a local nonprofit. And I presented the findings of these agendas to you last fall. Next slide. One of the things that happened since the 2019 update was the summer of 2020. We had over 50 days over 110 degrees. That summer will be the average summer in the 2040s. We have experienced the future. It is hot, it is deadly, it is unjust, and it is bad for Tempe if we don't take future action. This future that we are barreling towards is a combination of global climate change and the local urban heat island that our urban form and material choices created. If we want a healthier and less deadly future, we need to change our built environment and reduce the greenhouse gas emissions that contribute to climate change. Next slide. The Sustainability and Resilience Office has been working on a new approach with city staff and researchers at ASU to build processes and practices to equitably cool Tempe and ensure that we're using weather and climate data to address extreme heat in our city. Heat is more prominent in neighborhoods that house residents of color and the elderly. Resilience to extreme heat is a racial justice issue. It is a social justice issue. And we must work to address historic inequalities that have led to certain neighborhoods being hotter than others. This is not specific to Tempe. I have been incredibly impressed by recent efforts in the city of Scottsdale, city of Phoenix, and city of Mesa that are addressing heat and racial equity issues in an urgent and substantive way. This did not happen when I came to the Valley 14 years ago. That intersection of social justice, racial justice, and climate was not talked about. And to have many of Tempe's neighboring cities addressing this is just incredible personally to see. Next slide. One truly amazing component of the last 2 years is that climate action was taking place during the planning process. The photo on the left shows an engagement at Escalante Park led by Unlimited Potential. We got input from residents that's now supporting changes to SRP's M-Power program so that residents experiencing energy security have more support. We've also seen changes to parks, recreation fields, city buildings, do the hard work of Grace and our facility staff led by Charlie Bladine in improving the city while reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And you see that with the photos both on the fields and in the Kiwanis gym. We also saw an amazing partnership with Local First Arizona, Downtown Tempe Authority, the Tempe Chamber of Commerce, and our Municipal Utilities Department to conduct water audits and get access to rebates for downtown Tempe businesses to invest in water conservation and decarbonization. These stories demonstrate the power of partnerships that are a key piece of Tempe's approach to climate action and showing how it's having impact both in our city operations and in our community. Next slide. Today, you're going to hear from Grace about municipal greenhouse gas emissions and future actions that we are considering in that area. And then I'll come back to discuss community emissions and recommendations. Just a huge thank you to Grace for her amazing work in leading our climate work in city operations, and she'll take it from here.
Thanks, Braden. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you, Grace.
Oh. Thanks, Mayor. As a reminder, our municipal actions include how we reduce our energy use in city buildings, outdoor lighting, and water treatment, and how it reduced fuel use in transportation and municipal fleet and transit fleet. Next slide. As part of the Climate Action Plan update, we recently completed a municipal greenhouse gas emissions inventory based on 2020 calendar year data. The blue bars in the chart are transportation emissions from municipal fleet and transit fleet. The orange bars are energy emissions. Light orange is for the streetlights and traffic signals. The medium orange is water and wastewater treatment facilities, and the dark orange is for buildings and facilities. Overall, municipal emissions decreased by 1,013 metric tons of carbon dioxide in the last 5 years. Next slide.
Grace, quick thing before you go up. If you're not speaking, I just need everyone to go on mute just to make sure we can hear Grace.
Well, then, I mean, they gotta understand that if we do this, it's not, it's
I
gonna help us.
really quickly, excuse me, if we need everyone to go on mute. If you're not Grace right now and you're not speaking, we just need everyone else on the phone to go on mute, please.
The area is just so, it's like filled, kind of like the other ones, just so filled that I wasn't talking to you.
Okay, I will attempt to deal with this. So, great, Grace, go ahead.
Okay. Again, this chart shows the comparison of, back one, please. Back to the chart with the percentage. Back one more. Oh, there it is. Okay. So this shows a comparison of the 2020 and 2015 emissions. In 2020, the energy emissions increased and transportation emissions decreased. Overall, municipal emissions are down 2.5% from 2015 to 2020. Next slide. So what actions has the city completed and what is next? Staff worked with a consultant on building assessments and a retro commissioning report at the library. Facilities, sustainability, and engineering staff have worked with a consultant on a sustainable facilities plan for future remodels and construction of city buildings. Next actions are to continue building assessments and energy retrofits at city facilities to reduce energy use and reduce costs. Next slide. For outdoor lighting, park staff have upgraded lighting in parks to LEDs. Transportation and street maintenance staff have upgraded neighborhood streetlights to LEDs. And the next actions are to continue retrofit arterial streetlights to LEDs and to upgrade facility lights to LEDs. Next slide. For water infrastructure, assessments of all the water treatment facilities has been completed. The 2 water treatment plants have new exterior LED lights. The next actions are to add solar panels at the South Water Treatment Plant and do energy retrofits at the administration buildings. Next slide. For municipal fleet and transit fleet, Municipal Utilities has 20 electric vehicles and 33 EV charging stations. Consultants have completed an EV charging facilities feasibility study for city fleet. For the next actions, there are opportunities to expand electrification in the city fleet and to pilot electric buses in the transit fleet. Next slide. The next proposed investments in municipal operations on the policies and programs side, council funded a sustainable facilities plan and fleet EV roadmap. Community development and the Office of Sustainability and Resilience is working on a city green building policy, and you will see a budget request for workforce EV charging infrastructure. On the infrastructure side, the next investments are energy efficiency and retrofits in city buildings, resilient energy hubs with the first one at Dorsey and Apache, electrification of city and transit fleets, and workforce and fleet charging infrastructure. There will be a separate budget request for fleet EV charging infrastructure and installing solar panels at city facilities. Next, Braden will talk about community actions.
So to remind you, the community actions are really about supporting change with our residents, businesses, industry, and transportation. Next slide. So as you can see that we've seen a 16% reduction between our 2015 and 2020 data. One thing to note is that we worked with some of our partners who support our greenhouse gas emissions work and realized we needed to change the factors in our 2015 data. So if you were to look back at the 2019 document, it's a different number for our total 2015 emissions. That's because there were some overestimates having to do with the emissions coming from our energy system and from our transportation calculations. So we are seeing some change, but not as much change as is necessary to reach our goals as of this point yet. We will come back to you on April 7th for a presentation on our wedge analysis, which shows us more about potential projections and different trajectories. And we look forward to bringing in a consulting firm, KLA, Kim Lundgren and Associates, who's currently helping us with that analysis. Next slide. Here are the numbers more specifically. Next slide. So in terms of proposed investments that are coming out of the 4 agendas, we have policies, programs, infrastructure, and personnel. So on the policy side, you're going to be hearing about work we're doing with community development on EV charging and solar readiness and building code. We are making a budget supplemental proposal for a resilient Tempe master plan and utility feasibility study to look into options of improving our green stormwater infrastructure, urban forestry, and how that ends up in our private development code and in our own engineering standards. And out of the youth agenda, they really want us to be focused on local food and food access. And so we have a budget request for a local food roadmap coming out of the youth agenda. These are just overviews. There's a whole list of budget supplementals that you'll get to look at. We're trying to highlight a few key ones as a best of. On the program side, we've had some really great work by local residents for local residential green stormwater infrastructure. And this is a picture of a pilot project we did with 4 Peaks and Watershed Management Group, along with several departments helping support this work. And the idea is to make that a permanent program in our office. We also currently have a grant with the National Endowment for the Arts that has gone to ASU to help us with the with work of involving tribes in city building and city decision making, as well as thinking about indigenous land stewardship. So there's an interest in continuing that work. And then we've had for the last several years funding for climate sensitive urban forestry as part of the Indian gaming grants from SRP MIC, and there's an interest in making that program permanent. Next slide. Then on the personnel side, we currently have a neighborhood resilience coordinator and a youth engagement coordinator that are grant funded, and there's interest in moving forward those as permanent full-time positions. There's also an opportunity to take advantage of upcoming federal and philanthropic grants by having a permanent policy and grants coordinator position. Then on the infrastructure side, you'll have an opportunity in the CIP budget to take a look at a lot of exciting investments, continuing to invest in our transit shelters, which both from the climate justice agenda and youth agenda were seen as very important investments to accelerate, as well as continuing to work with regional and federal partners on funding bus rapid transit. You heard also from Grace continuing to look for community EV charging money, working on streetcar extension with Mesa and regional partners, continuing to invest in urban forestry. And then there's also, for the first time ever, out of engineering and transportation, going to be a line item at some point for green stormwater infrastructure so that we have money especially dedicated to having that infrastructure moving forward. Next slide. So in terms of next steps, you will have on March 3rd an opportunity to adopt this climate action plan update. You'll also be seeing initial recommendations out of the CIP budget and acceleration strategies. In April, you'll be able to review both the CIP and budget supplemental requests. Like I said, April 7th, we'll be coming back to you with the full wedge analysis so you can take a look at some of the projections from our consultant. You'll also see work from Engineering Transportation Department on our city and ourselves on city building policy, as well as work that we're continuing with community development on the International Green Construction Code. And then ongoing, this climate action work doesn't stop. There's continually going to be opportunities to adopt policy, support programs, invest in infrastructure, and continually engage with our business community and our residents. So before I ask questions, I do need to make some thank yous. This has truly been a team effort work. First of all, I want to thank you, Mayor and Council, and our senior management, including Andrew, Rosa, Tom, and Stephen, for their continued support of this work and your continued support of this work. Every department has been involved in this work, as residents and businesses. This CAP update has truly been a community update, and I'm deeply grateful for all the time that residents, businesses, and city staff have spent on this work. A huge thank you needs to go to Communications and Media Relations, Nikki Ripley, Shannon Reed. Keith Farnham has designed our plan. If you haven't had a chance to actually look at the physical draft plan, it's a beautiful document. Keith spent a lot of time on that work, and we're deeply grateful for the whole CMR team and as to how much they've supported us. I also have to thank, we have to thank the whole neighborhood services team and Shauna Warner and her leadership. Our office is very small, so the city manager's office is hugely critical to the work we do. Aaron Fillmore, Benicia Benson, Lisa Groom, and Megan Hutchinson have all helped make this plan possible. And then I also have to deeply thank our entire office. Brianne Fisher, the majority of this plan was executed in terms of finishing the actual document by fellow Andrea Escobar, who you've heard from before. But we've also had significant input from Henry Pearson, Dylan Evans, Ty Wagner, Marcus Donaldson, and years of fellows and interns who have done this work on weekends, on evenings, between classes to make all of this possible. So it's truly been a team effort, and just needed to make sure that everyone knew all the players that have gone to making this happen. Thank you, and with that, we'll take questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Braden. Thank you, Grace. Really appreciate it. Before I go to council comments, just wanted to do one last check, Madam Clerk. Were there any more cards received? I know just for everyone on the phone that we have to receive comment cards for public comment by 2 p.m. today to ensure that you'll be able to speak. Just wanted to check, Madam Clerk, are there any other cards that we received from anyone wanting to speak on this item?
No other cards received, but one of our early submitters, Don Dietz, is now present.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, let's we can elevate Don if he's available.
Don, they're calling for you.
I was going to say, while we wait for Don, let me go ahead, Councilmember Cubie. I'm going to go to you, and then I'll come back to Don Dietz, Madam Clerk, whenever he's by the phone.
Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Braden Kay, and thank you so much for thanking all those climate fellows who worked so hard over these years, and Grace, our energy manager. You've been there from not just the very beginning of all this, but before the very beginning. And Braden, you're our first sustainability manager, then director of the Office of Sustainability and Resilience. And Brianne jumping in as the Climate Action Plan manager is such a benefit to the city. At the team that you're establishing, though I know you need more, is just so effective and so good at what they do. I think you told me there are 19 public meetings, and that is just a phenomenal testament to the exhaustive community engagement here. And it's so important. Like when we approach businesses, we're not just talking about local first. We're talking about also the Chamber of Commerce. They were fully ingrained in this planning, and young people were ingrained. Young people helped to plan some of these events. And then we have neighborhoods and climate justice and social justice advocates. So thank you so much for that inclusive approach. And I also wanted to give a shout out, as long as we're full of thanks tonight and gratitude. I want to give thanks to Ani Shakurjian, who was a council member before I was on board, who really had a passion and a vision for sustainability and really incubated so much of what we see here today. And I just want to publicly salute her and thank her for all her work, her passion, and her expertise. I do have one question, Braden and Grace, and I wonder about performance measures, whether we might see some either enhanced performance measures with, steps, maybe talking about our 100% goal steps that we have built into that for yearly or decadal goals, but also performance measures related to transportation. I know that we had to give our $100 spend. We had a hard time figuring out where do we put if we want to have more shade and bus stops. It was in satisfaction with transportation. It would be good to really more fully flesh out transportation in congruence with the climate action plan and see if there are some performance measures that might be drawn up that would better reflect what's happening with the climate action plan. And I'm not sure about the timing of that, Braden, whether that's, obviously you're not going to come in March 3rd and do that, but at some point in the spring, if we could see some enhanced and new performance measures that reflect the climate action plan, especially as relates to transportation, I think that would be a great addition.
Thank you, Councilmember Cupie. So there definitely has been a robust conversation, especially from the Transportation Commission, who has had a deep discussion around additional performance measures, specifically around vehicles miles traveled, and having that be a key indicator. Our transportation emissions are calculated by MAG's vehicle miles traveled number. So that's something that Grace and I already track as part of this process, and certainly that would be up to mayor and council to decide if you wanted that to be an official performance measure of the city to get direction from you on that. We also did receive a letter from many of our environmental organizations saying that we need additional electric vehicle and performance measures, and so that's something that we could also take direction on from mayor and council. In terms of milestones, our performance management system doesn't have a lot of milestone numbers in it. We tend to put milestones in our strategies and performance measures. So that's a continued conversation. I think talking to strategic management and diversity office about how we do milestones and how that fits into our performance measure system, I think that's an important conversation to have citywide. And I do have some hesitations about us having these performance measures having milestones when we don't really do milestones in our performance measure system. I think that is a broader conversation for mayor and council to have with strategic management and diversity. But I do hear your point there.
Could I follow up? That's well understood. I understand about those milestone metrics. I completely understand. But with the transportation performance measures, whether enhanced or added, is there a will of the council colleagues to just have suggestions from our Office of Sustainability and Resilience and the Commission about what those measures could possibly be and have them come back to us sometime before July?
I'd be in favor of that, Councilmember Cubie.
Thank you, Councilmember Adams. I would be in favor of that as well. Anyone else on council?
Sounds good, Mayor.
Great. Thank you,
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Sounds good. Thank you, Vice Mayor Keating.
I'm good with that also. And Braden, I love that you were thanking all those people, but I was kind of giggling thinking about how that's just the two of you in that office over there and how you get so much doggone stuff done. You are amazing. Thanks for all the energy that you and Brianne and your department and all the people that work with you have. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Councilmember.
Thank you, Councilmember Garland. So it sounds like we have consensus to move forward with Councilmember Cubie's recommendation. Councilmember Cubie, did you have anything else or?
No, I'm good, Mr. Mayor.
You're all good? All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Let's see. Any other council members, any comments or questions for Dr. K?
Mr. Mayor, I just want to thank Dr. K and Brianne and Grace for their wonderful work on this. It's so exciting to be a part of the Sustainable and Livable Communities Committee with Councilmember Cubie, and it's so exciting to see these things going into action. And I will be proudly voting for this measure next time. Thank you so much, and thanks for the very valuable presentations. Also, quite informative to our community. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Adams. Really appreciate it. Let me do one quick thing here. I just want to do one last check to see if we still have Don Dietz elevated here, just because I want to make sure he has an opportunity to speak.
Can you hear me, folks?
I can, Don.
Okay, how are you, Corey?
I'm good. Good to hear from you.
Oh, okay, I'd like to offer just a little blurb, a minute or two to you, Corey, and to the rest of the distinguished members on the city council. You know, Kathy and I moved in this community about 30 years ago. She, as you know, served on the HRC for 2 terms. She's been very active in community, much more active than I. Of course, she's younger than I, of course, so she can move better. But anyway, I do want to say that we live in the Broadmoor neighborhood, right across from the back schoolyard on La Diosa Broadmoor neighborhood right here. We're members of the Broadmoor Association, the BNA. And also we're members of CLIP. Obviously, our daughter and our son-in-law are one of the leaders and the innovators of CLIP. And so we're very into CLIP, and I needn't speak any more about it because I understood that Beth called and said that you already heard us. I apologize for not hearing and answering your first call because we've had 2 weeks of computer trouble and we finally just barely got straightened out. I want to stress the fact that we started meeting in 2019 at each other's homes in person. The small group of us from the BNA neighborhood, and actually some snuck over from other neighborhoods when they heard about us, because we believe that we can't only talk, but we have to do something about climate change. And so we started a brainstorm about the whole process. And so during the epidemic, it sort of slowed us down, but we continued to meet every month, Zooming. And so we've been meeting, Zooming, tossing around ideas. We had projects going, but that was all stalled. We even contacted Tesla at one point and got a good deal for solar energy, but that was before the pandemic. Then everything stalled. We even had 82 members after one of our neighborhood association meetings, you know, blocked the street, and we met, that signed a letter saying that they would be interested in hearing more about if we could work out things with Tesla. But that's a past thing now, I think. However, in the last 6 to 8 months, we've all been researching and working hard on the project that was delivered to your commission, Sustainability Commission, that I'm sure you all are familiar with now. And we believe that this is an opportunity for our city to move forward about this. And we are here to sort of remind you to support it. You know, I'm going to end this brief note to you all by saying this, that we moved to Tempe, not knowing what Tempe was like 30 years ago when I was recuperating from a liver transplant at Rochester at Mayo. But we are so delighted that we just happened to end up in Tempe because we felt this was a small community. Tempe has been the cradle of one of the most innovative universities in the country. And I believe that Tempe still is the most forward-looking city in the whole valley.
30 seconds.
And that's why I ask you, please, to consider carefully and to review this proposal, which I think you will see has some potential for our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Don. Really appreciate your comments, and just great to hear from you as always. Let me just check, Council, any other comments on your end? Okay, I just want to, very quick comment on my end, just wanted to say thank you to all the speakers And thank you to both Dr. Kay and Grace for the presentation this evening. Really appreciate it. I totally agree with a lot of the, the statements that were made. Appreciate Councilmember Cuby's recommendation that was moved forward unanimously by council this evening. And quite honestly, I agree. I mean, the reality is a plan on a piece of paper or on slides is one thing. But for any plan to be fully executed and implemented, it has to have the funding and resources necessary to actually get the job done to really advance the cause. And so, quite honestly, I think that, it's definitely time for us to do that, to make sure that we put the necessary resources into our Climate Action Plan 2.0 and all of the work we're doing in sustainability to really make sure that we can see that vision through. And I'm very, very excited to see the energy and frankly, the excitement of all the people who spoke this evening and people who I talk to in the community all the time, who are very supportive of our sustainability initiatives and our climate goals. And I just wanted to say really quickly, too, just before we close out on this one, I was very fortunate, along, myself and Dr. Braden Kay to be named to LISC National's Emerging Leaders Council, which is a national organization, and I'm so happy to serve alongside Braden. But the topic this year is going to be really talking about sustainability and really how we can bring a focus to that, not just in Arizona, but frankly throughout the country. But all of that would not have been possible if it were not for the work of people like Councilmember Lauren Kuby and Councilmember Ani Shakurjan and the trailblazing work they've done on sustainability and climate justice issues here in the city of Tempe. The reality is, LISC Phoenix and LISC National, we're looking at the city of Tempe because of the work that people like Councilmember Kuby have been doing for such a long time throughout her illustrious career, and Councilmember Shakurjan before her. And of course, all the work that Dr. Kay did prior to joining the city of Tempe and all that he's done to grow his office when it first started to really, bringing in millions of dollars to support these efforts. So I just wanted to say, it's the city of Tempe is truly on the map when it comes to issues pertaining to sustainability and climate justice. And I'm very, very excited about that. But honestly, I just have to say it would not have happened if we didn't have council members and people who've served on this council, like Lauren Kuby and Ani Shakurjan, who really put these issues at the forefront. And Councilmember Kuby, I just wanted to say, your leadership and the ability to work alongside you as you've really kind of brought this issue to the forefront in Tempe has definitely been something that's going to last for decades to come. And I just wanted to say thank you to you for those efforts and for Dr. Kay for continuing to grow the sustainability office. We're going to continue to see great things and great strides the city of Tempe will continue to make as we move forward. So I just wanted to make sure I made those comments before we wrapped up.
Thank you so much, Mayor.
Mr.
Really
Mayor.
appreciate it.
That's so kind. I just have to say the Center for the Future of Arizona a couple of years ago chose Braden Kay throughout the entire state as the emerging leader, and he's gone to Scottsdale, he's gone to Mesa. He doesn't just consider this a job for Tempe, but he understands the regional aspects of it. He brings so many people together across our region, across our state, and I'm so grateful to that. And Councilmember Adams, she and I serve on the Sustainable and Livable Communities Committee, and I'm so delighted that she'll be I shouldn't say I'm so delighted she's working on these issues and we'll hopefully work on them to come because it's been a really wonderful partnership. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Councilmember Adams deserves a lot of credit as well, and we'll continue to carry on that work into the future. So thank you, Councilmember Adams, for your dedication to that council committee and the continued work on these issues that are obviously critically important, not just for Tempe, but for our entire world and for our entire planet. So thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much. And I will carry the torch on, Lauren. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Any other last comments before we close this item out? All right, hearing none. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the presentation and looking forward to seeing what we continue to do moving forward. All right, next up, I'm going to go back to item 2A, which is the proposed Juneteenth holiday, and I'm going to bring up Jonay Harrison, our Equity and Inclusion Manager.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. It is a pleasure to be with you this evening. I am going to try and share my screen. so that we can get moving. And hopefully, once it's up on screen, I'll get going with you. I believe it's there. So it's a pleasure, Jonah Harrison, Equity and Inclusion Manager here at the city, to speak with you about Juneteenth being declared an official city holiday. As you all know, the background of Juneteenth is one that is rich in history and heritage. It commemorates June 19th, 1865, as the day in which enslaved African Americans heard about the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. It took 2 years from 1863, the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, for word to reach all the slaves in the Confederate States of their freedom. It is the oldest nationally celebrated commemoration of the end of slavery in the United States. And so what you see on the screen on June 11th, 2020, then Mayor Mark Mitchell proclaimed June 19th as Juneteenth for the city of Tempe. And then in the subsequent year on June 10th, 2021, Mayor Corey Woods announced June 19th as a city holiday. And in each of those 2 years, employees were granted a floating holiday to commemorate Juneteenth. What you'll see is that last year on June 16th, 2021, the federal government also proclaimed it as a federal holiday. Not on your screen, but equally important, is that Juneteenth also has a commemorative flag that was created in 1997. We have had now 2 years of a floating holiday, 2 years of a proclamation announcing Juneteenth as a holiday. And so we're at the important step for council to direct us as staff as what are our next steps in terms of granting an official city holiday for the city of Tempe. There are 2 very simple solutions for you. I am not hiding the ball. The preferred solution is the first one that you see, a permanent solution where we would recommend that the city and council direct staff to proceed with ordering a designated day of June 19th as a standing recurring holiday, establishing a permanent day as opposed to a floating day. Multiple reasons. First, it does give the full weight and effect that this holiday deserves, as well as it's consistent with the federal holiday proclamation. And alternatively, if the permanent resolution is not made, then we would ask for, in 2022, another proclamation to be granted to designate June 19th, 2022 as the City of Tempe holiday. In the event council does direct staff, then our next steps that we intend would be to present again to council with a RFCA and a resolution at the March 3rd regular council meeting. In the interim, however, HR has set a tentative merit board meeting for February 22nd in anticipation of moving forward. And in that February 22nd meeting, it is important that we review personnel amendments and changes. After that February 22nd meeting, then we would present on March 3rd at the regular council meeting, the RFCA with amended personnel rules as an official city holiday. So at that time, it's a very brief presentation, but an equally important one. And Mr. Mayor, that's it from my end.
Great. Thank you so much, Jonay. Really appreciate the presentation. I will just say I am in full support of the permanent option and doing this by resolution to make this a recurring holiday. And just, wanted to thank you, Jonay, for all of your work on this, and also wanted to acknowledge Mayor Mark Mitchell and his work on this as well, for being the first mayor to do this. So I just wanted to make sure that I made that acknowledgement very publicly. But I would definitely be in favor of option 1 for the permanent resolution. And with that, I'm going to look to Vice Mayor Keating.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me? WebEx is saying it can't detect my microphone.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Jonay. I really appreciate the presentation. Of course, I'm in favor of option 1 as well. And I'm so happy to see this and so proud that once again, we say it all the time that it's become cliche that, Tempe is leading the way. So, I'm very happy to see this and looking forward to our city employees getting a paid Juneteenth holiday from here on out. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Keating. I also next saw Councilmember Navarro.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And Jonay, thank you for the presentation. Outstanding. And yes, I will support option 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Navarro. Let me next go to Councilmember Garland.
Hi, Mayor. I am also supporting option 1. Thank you so much, Janae. I love hearing your lovely voice and great presentation. Excited. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Councilmember Garland. Councilmember Cubie.
Yes, fully supportive of option 1. Thank you, Janae, for all of your hard work and also for the HRC. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Let me next go to Councilmember Adams.
Yes, I fully support option 1, and I just also want to say thank you to Jonay for being part of our city team and family, and you're doing a great job. So keep up the great work, and that's all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Councilmember Adams. So it looks like we have unanimous consensus to go forward with the resolution to make this a permanent holiday on June 19th. Thank you so much, Jonay. Appreciate it. And just so excited to see the city of Tempe take this very forward-thinking step. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Council, for all of your commitment to the work of equity and inclusion in this city.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, next up here, we have item 2C, which is the introduction of the 5-year capital improvements program project requests. And I'm going to bring up Tom Dunsing and Mark Day.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. I'll introduce this while the presentation is being pulled up. Oh, thank you, Jason. I'm joined here by Mark Day, the Municipal Budget Director, and today is really the kickoff of the budget process for fiscal 22-23. It starts with the introduction of the CIP, and as you know, it's a 5-year CIP beginning fiscal year 22-23 through fiscal 26-27, the 5 years. And every year we ask departments to submit requested CIP funding for the 5-year CIP, and department assessments also help in framing the CIP. We've worked with every department to ensure consistent presentations are before council. And I'd really like to give a big thank you to Robbie Ashton and Benicia Benson, and also Mark Day for leading this effort. It's a tremendous amount of information to be pulled together and synthesized for council review. We're not seeking council input on specific projects at this point. This is a first view. We're providing you with all the projects in the document that will be referenced in the evaluation and budget allocation process to come. At the end of the presentation, we'll provide council an opportunity for input about potential omitted projects and areas of emphasis that we would need to focus on over the next 5 years. The current slide before you is the council strategic priorities. And the CIP addresses many strategic priorities. However, at this point in the process, we feel this most aligns with transparency in government and developing strong community connections. And now I'll turn it over to Mark, who'll do the majority of heavy lifting on this presentation.
All right, thank you, Tom. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Mark Day, Municipal Budget Director. We can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So development of the city's operating and capital budgets is a public process. So I just want to briefly review the upcoming meeting dates as we work through developing those budgets. So yesterday we had 2 virtual public forums that were well attended. And then obviously today we are here to talk about the proposed capital projects, as Tom mentioned, that cover fiscal years 22-23 through 26-27. And then a little bit later tonight, we will be providing the updated long-range forecast. And then we're going to return on March 24th with our initial prioritization of projects for inclusion in the 5-year CIP. And so this is another opportunity for you to provide input on specific project funding priorities. So in addition, based on the START survey tool discussion that we had on December 16th, Council identified 13 focus areas. So during this meeting, we will present acceleration models and related strategies for those focus areas related to the capital program. And then we've scheduled a follow-up meeting if needed on April 7th for the CIP program. Then on April 21st, we'll have the city manager's recommended operating and capital budget. And in this presentation, during this presentation will be the acceleration models and related strategies for those focus areas from the start to related to the operating budget. And then we kind of move into the more formal statutory process, and you can see tentative adoption there in May, followed by final adoption, and then the final action would be the property tax levy. Right, next slide, please. So in coordination with Communications and Media Relations and Neighborhood Services, we have developed a public outreach plan to provide information to our residents about the city's budget and allow residents and stakeholders to provide us input and feedback during the budget development process. So we currently have an online forum going where residents are provided a theoretical $100, so almost similar to the START tool, to spend among various programs and services aligned to the 5 council priorities. So that forum, you can see the address there, is currently open through March 7th. Yesterday, as I mentioned earlier, we had 2 virtual public forums. We are also planning some pop-up events this month where we go out and meet the community. So we had one last Saturday at the North Tempe Multi-Gen Center, where we just set up a table and asked the residents their input on the city's budget. So we're going to have a few more of those. And we're also planning a session with the Mayor's Youth Advisory Commission to gather the youth input. So all this feedback from both the online and public forums will be provided to council in the council packets when the operating and capital budgets are discussed. So in addition to those forums, we've also established a public website. You can see that there, tempe.gov/budget, that contains resources and information for the community on all aspects of the operating and capital budgets. We've also coordinated with Communications and Media Relations and Neighborhood Services to inform residents about the budget meetings and online resources via Tempe Today press releases, as well as social media. So in addition, we did something new this year. We produced a video narrated by the mayor to encourage community participation in the budget process. So we'd like to take a few minutes just to look at that video.
I'm Mayor Corey Woods. The city of Tempe is an energetic and innovative place, attracting millions of people who live, work, play, and learn here. This is reflected in the programs we offer and the services we provide. In fact, what we do in Tempe is different than in any other city. The programs and services we offer really do make waves in the desert, but none of it is possible without a budget that reflects funding for those programs and services that are priorities for the community. Every year, one of the most important things my city council colleagues and I do is pass the city's annual operating and capital budgets. But we need your help to do it. This is your budget. Your input and feedback as a resident or as a stakeholder truly matters. And when you ask, the city council and I listen. Here are just a few examples of how public input has helped to shape the city's future. You ask for better roads and sidewalks. We listen. In city streets and sidewalks over the next several years. You told us homelessness was a top issue for you. We responded to your compassion by adding $1.3 million to hire more homeless outreach staff, expand our Tempe Works Jobs program, create a new mental health response unit, enhance park maintenance, and more. And the city has purchased an entire building that now serves as a transitional shelter for those who are homeless, while our specialists work to find them permanent housing. You asked for a more strategic approach to community safety. We are now diverting mental health calls to a crisis center and Care 7, which allows our officers to focus on fighting crime while getting people the expert help they need. We also convened the Public Safety Advisory Task Force to help continue to build trust, accountability, and dialogue between the community and our police department. You asked for more trees and shade. We listened and allocated more than $2 million for trees over the next several years as part of a comprehensive urban forestry program. These are just a few examples of how the city budget truly works for you. Now it's our turn to do the asking. We invite you to take part in the budget planning process for fiscal year 22-23, which begins July 1st, 2022. We want your feedback, and there are plenty of opportunities to be involved. You can visit tempe.gov/forum to tell us your top priorities for investing in the community. There will also be several public meetings this spring to provide input. To get information about all of this and the city's budget process, please visit tempe.gov/budget plan or call Tempe 311. It's your voice that will help build the future of our great city.
Okay, first of all, thank you, Mayor, for participating in that video, and a big thank you to Nikki Ripley and her team for putting that together. So next, we'd like to briefly go over the CIP document that you received in your agenda material. So this contains all the proposed projects for the 5-year CIP covering fiscal year 22-23 through 26-27. So the departments have submitted over 200 projects requests over the 5-year CIP that total $1.4 billion. So in comparison to this year's final adopted CIP, that was $1.1 billion. We'll be using this document going forward as a reference when we discuss specific CIP projects and for projects recommended for funding. So to help you navigate this document going forward, to help you navigate this document, we provided a table of contents that contains links to the overall CIP program, as well as each of the 14 program summaries in the document. So page 1 contains the overall CIP for the entire requested program, and then page 2 is an overall summary of the proposed funding sources. And then we have provided a summary page for each of the major programs that links to the listing of all the proposed projects. Please note that new projects are underlined. So a new project means that the project has never been requested or was previously requested, but not included in the adopted CIP. If you click on the project name, it will take you to the project description, where we provide a narrative on the project purpose and need, the priority type, alignment with council strategic priorities and performance measures, estimated costs and funding sources. And then we provided a bookmark for each project request. So next slide, please. So I'll just run you through an example. So here is the table of contents that's in your packet. So if you clicked on the transit program, it would take you to the program summary page for transit. Next slide, please. So here's a listing of all of the proposed projects for transit. And then if you clicked on that first project, 8th Street Multi-Use Path, Creamery Branch Rail Path. So next slide, please. It will take you to the project description. So there's your overall description, the alignment to council priorities, performance measures, as well as estimated costs, and then funding sources. Next slide, please. All right, so the next step in the process will be for staff to begin to prioritize the proposed CIP projects based on funding capacity, as well as City Council approved scoring criteria. So we have 2 sets of criteria here. We have our primary prioritization scoring, and you can see we have 3 areas that we score on: public health and safety, asset preservation, and alignment to City Council adopted performance measures. And then we kind of fine tune it with secondary prioritization scoring, and you can see those scoring criteria on the slide there. And as I mentioned, we'll return on March 24th with our initial prioritization of the CIP. Next slide, please. I'll turn it back over to Tom.
Thanks, Mark. Again, Mayor and Council, we're not looking for input on specific projects. Rather, we're really seeking input about potential omitted projects or other areas of emphasis over the next 5 years that you'd like us to look at. And with that, Mayor, I will turn it back to you. Mark and I are here to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate the presentation. As you can see, the sun is coming in from a very interesting position at this point in my office, so I will take care of that the next time I turn my camera off. Great presentation. Really appreciate the information, as I'm sure our residents do, to understand exactly how we develop our budgets for the upcoming fiscal year. And how they can actively participate in terms of providing feedback and input, and frankly help the entire council to help us shape what that budget would look like. With that said, I'm going to turn to my colleagues to see if there's any comments or questions or feedback while I attempt to get this sun out of my eyes. Councilmember Cubie.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, we're not talking about anything specific tonight, but I know we do have a movement of $19 million from the general fund into the CIP in order to jumpstart the moving of the yard. And, you know, I do understand that it's nearing the end of its useful life, whether it's at the end of its useful life. I know previous planning showed it at the very tail end of the CIP, so it has moved up to be, you know, in the CIP for the first year. And so, you know, I just have, you know, a little concern about $19 million from the general fund going into the CIP for that, if it can be delayed until a future bonding issue comes before the voters. That's, you know, possibly a consideration, but that's just my overall concern.
Sorry about that. Let me next go to Councilmember Garland.
Hi, thank you, Mayor. All I wanted to say was that I really appreciated the information that we're getting, and I love the document that we can look through and click on the link, and it takes us there. And thank you so much for explaining about the ones that are underlined. I appreciate all that, but I also want to say I think it's really, really important that we have resident participation. It's really important for us to listen to our neighbors about what they think or what they'd like us to be focusing on. So I love the video that you shot. I shared it on my social media also. I'm really glad that you did that. I'm glad that you pointed out some of the things that we did listen to them and we did try to make changes. So I just want to say thank you so much for doing that video. Thank you for the presentation. And neighbors and residents, take us up on it and go look at the information and give us your input. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Garland. Let's see, any other council members? Here through my list. Councilmember Arredondo Savage.
Hello, Mayor. I appreciate my tardiness getting here tonight. But I'm glad I was able to jump in. And again, just to really appreciate our finance team. It's just really nice to be in a really good position to be able to move forward and knock out some of these projects that I think are priorities, not only for the council, but the community, and definitely going to enhance the quality of life of many. The one thing I know we've kind of talked a little bit, actually talked a lot about some of the things that we're doing to just kind of reinvigorate Tempe and realize that we have a lot of aging infrastructure, but not just infrastructure. So means when we talk about street and roads, and we talked about redoing our entry signs. And I think it'd just be really great to just talk a little bit more about a bigger campaign to really just refresh Tempe and ensure that we are providing what I would like to see, a city that everybody can be proud of. I love Tempe. I'm so proud of Tempe. We do some really remarkable things, but there are some areas in Tempe that are a little tired, and I really do think that they could use our attention. It could really help spur not only just economic development, but maybe special events and maybe just the ability to utilize spaces better. So maybe there's just an opportunity for us to look at a bigger concept of what we're doing to just really tackle some of the aging infrastructure, some of maybe the downtown area, all around downtown. There's so much investment down there. I just want to make sure at the same time we are doing our part to be able to keep up with, I think, our expectations from our residents, from our visitors, from people that, come here for all reasons. But just kind of one of the things I just like to maybe put on the radar for the future. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Arredondo Savage. I just want to make a quick comment about that, then I'm going to go to Councilmember Navarro. I want to say I completely agree with everything Councilmember Arredondo Savage said. We do a lot of very big things as a city that are very kind of very progressive and very forward thinking. But at the same time, I think one of the things that we all hear about as council members on a regular basis are things about, what are we doing when it comes to street and road resurfacing of our major arterials or our collector streets or even just our side streets in neighborhoods? What are we doing to maintain our alleys? What are we doing to kind of refresh entry signs to the city? I know we had a previous work study session conversation about getting new entry signs that would kind of, show people what Tempe's all about and really truly welcome them to our city. And so, from my perspective, I completely agree with what Councilmember Arredondo Savage said. I think a campaign to that we could promote and that would really kind of show residents that we are working to refresh some of the things in the city of Tempe, people's roads, their alleys, the landscaping and, center medians and the plants and things and just things of that nature, I think would be tremendous. And I think those are changes that while they might sound small, those are the things that our residents frankly notice each and every day when they're driving down their streets or when they're, commuting to and from work or picking up their kids or dropping them off. So I completely agree with her. That's something I would really like to see reflected in this year's budget moving forward. Let me go next to Councilmember Navarro.
Mayor, thank you, and thank you for those comments. And Councilmember Arredondo Savage, yeah, you hit it on my radar. Obviously, the street landscape, right-of-ways, things like that. In addition, I mean, obviously, the stuff that we do need to invest in, the core stuff for the city. We need to increase our fire service, our fire stations, our PD substations. Things of those needs have to be done and met. But in addition to that, I'm actually doing training in Texas for the fire department, and we're in a small town called Grapevine, and it's amazing how a small town could have probably one of the best community centers I've seen in a long time for the residents. And that just kind of, says that to Councilmember Arredondo Savage's point, we do have some tired facilities. And I kind of probably point to maybe Kiwanis Park, an upgrade of today's modern times of having workout facilities, multiple basketball courts, the pool, the wave pool, the better use of how we design a facility. I think we need to start looking at those things in the future and starting to really understand or really anticipate that need and how that would spur more community involvement when you have a dynamic center. And I just referenced the one I just saw today. So I think you're spot on getting those things on the radar. So I appreciate it. But let me finish though. Obviously, we are investing in the downtown. Obviously, we're seeing the growth in the downtown. And I have to strongly say and push, and I hope the council agrees, we really need to look at a dynamic landscape for our downtown area. And we really need to be thoughtful in the type of vegetation, the type of ground covering, whatever that may be, that it eliminates the collection of, I'll take rocks, for example, rocks that can get kicked out into the intersection and is just ugly. How do we maintain a perfect look that can endure the events that we have in the downtown area, but yet hold up to those events? So I strongly push that we start looking at, especially our downtown area, and maintaining that landscape. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Navarro. Let me next go to Vice Mayor Keating.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I agree with your comments and the comments of Councilmember Arredondo Savage and Councilmember Navarro. We certainly want to make Tempe as attractive as possible, not only to visitors, but our residents. I think we've already done a lot in that regard, right? When you're in Tempe, it certainly looks a lot different than when you're in other cities in the Valley. So I think we do a good job. But to Councilmember Arredondo Savage's point, there are some areas that do appear a little bit underserved. And I'm talking specifically, and I actually had a resident email me about this, and I'm preparing an email back to respond. So maybe if he's watching now, he could save me an email. But, specifically, I'm talking about the Maker District. Part of the Maker District plan was to, improve the the right of ways and thoroughfares of that area, to add a bike lane, to add some public art, to add a sidewalk where there isn't a sidewalk, which to me in a residential area, which is to me bizarre. So I'm certainly pleased with what I've seen and with the comments of my colleagues. I would definitely like to see, if possible, the Maker District improvements as far as public right-of-ways and as far as sidewalks and bike lanes, any infrastructure that is in the CIP, and I know there is some, because when we approved it, we added it out. I'd like to see that prioritized, because we have one project coming online in the Maker District. I know there's a few other shops looking around the Maker District to do some workforce housing in that area. So it won't be too long before there's a lot more folks in businesses in that area. So let's make sure that that area is ready when those folks move in. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Keating. Any other council members, any additional comments or questions? Councilmember Cubey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As long as we're getting specific, I agree so much with what our council, my council colleagues are saying. We've received a few eloquent letters in the past few weeks. I'm thinking of the group from Historic Preservation that wrote in about the Tempe Butte, about the cemetery. We celebrated it around Halloween, and it's looking pretty bedraggled. And I know a lot of past and current mayors are going to end up buried there. We'd like to have a nice refurbishment. But perhaps there could be a combination there with our urban forestry program, because the cemetery is looking a little bedraggled, should we say. And secondly, we had someone write in about sidewalks, as Vice Mayor Keating was saying, especially on Roosevelt Street near the Maker District, that they've been advocating for sidewalks for years. And lastly, it would be Mill Avenue. I've had conversations with Councilmember Navarro, whose passion it is to have our medians and our entryways really be beautiful and expressive of the kind of city we are. And we received a letter that was talking about Mill Avenue, that's one of the entryways into Tempe, and shouldn't it have a refurbishment? So just want to throw those three things out there that I don't think are currently be considered. Actually, the Roosevelt sidewalks might be in there, but just wanted to throw those out as a general yet specific recommendation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Councilmember Cubey. Let me next go to Councilmember Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to reiterate that a lot of what my council colleagues have said, and they made a lot of good points. Just want to really stress that our streets are very stressed and our residents are stressed about the streets being stressed. So I just want to make sure that we're really focusing on pouring more money into our streets and our sidewalks. I agree with the Roosevelt comment that Councilmember Cubey just made. They've been trying for 15 plus years to get a sidewalk there. We have people that are disabled in that area, and it's very difficult for them to get around, and I'm concerned about their safety. And I've been down there a number of times. They do need a sidewalk. So I just want to make sure that we continue to focus on our streets and sidewalks and making sure they're safe for everyone, all of our residents. I've talked to a lot of people as I've been on the campaign trail, and they've talked about how they've fallen on raised sidewalks and things like that. So we really need to keep that focus up there and keep the money coming in that direction also. And the downtown, I'm very supportive of really sprucing up our downtown area. I think it is long needed. I think we've done a lot of improvements, but we have a ways to go. So I would be supportive of that also. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Adams. Any other council members, any additional comments on this item? The great thing, I mean, is obviously lots of agreement across the board, that I heard this evening, regarding just sort of taking care of, vegetation, a lot of our walls, roads and alleys, and so just great. A lot of consensus about trying to do sort of a general campaign to refresh the city, everything from our neighborhoods and our major streets to the downtown area. So I think Tom, Mark, whatever we can do moving forward to really kind of pour some additional gasoline on some of those priorities. I mean, I think that we've got pretty much unanimous agreement across the board here.
Great, Mayor. Thank you so much, and great comments. And Mark and I will get back to the departments and bring back a CIP and information that hopefully reflects what the council has emphasized tonight. So really do appreciate it. And Mark, I really appreciate his work that he's put into this. So thanks, Mayor.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And I guess Tom and Mark don't go anywhere, because next up we have item 2D, which is the long-range financial forecast update, including the American Rescue Plan Act, otherwise known as ARPA.
Great, Mayor. Thank you so much. Again, Tom Dunsing, Interim Deputy City Manager, and I'm joined by Mark Day, Municipal Budget Director. And as Mayor and Council knows, a long-range forecast was presented on November 4th. And typically each year what we do is we follow it up with another forecast to really kick off the budget process, which what we're doing tonight. The purpose of the forecast is really to establish parameters in the upcoming fiscal 22-23 budget. It really kind of sets our limits where we want to budget. And as council and staff knows, this is a 5-year forecast, but again, we use these. We'll then dial it in and look at the current fiscal, or the year we're budgeting for, fiscal year 22-23. Next slide, please, Jason. The long-range forecast directly aligns with financial stability, and the goal really of the forecast is for the city to maintain its highest general obligation bond rating, which is AAA, by the way, and really keep the fund balance in the general fund within its policy level. And we'll go through that in detail in a few slides. Next slide, Jason. So forecast assumptions. What we've seen is really continued growth in our revenues, and in particular in our taxable sales, our sales tax revenues, and our state shared revenues. We're assuming no big impact of the pandemic at this point. Things have recovered financially, and we are not forecasting any major slowdowns due to the current pandemic. It also assumes consistent salary plans with our MOUs. So next slide, please. I'd like to touch a little bit on the guiding principles. We tend to be realistic in what we can forecast for revenues. We try to be realistic in what we can forecast for expenditures. But really what we try to do is have certainty when we make the forecast. There's a few guiding principles that we use when we go through and put the forecast together. I've got a few examples up here. One of them would be pending or proposed agreements. The assumption behind pending or proposed agreements is we do not include any impacts of proposed agreements until council has taken action to approve the agreement, and we can be assured that any expenditures that result in the agreement or any revenues that we get from the agreement are certain. The dollar amount and the timings are certain. The next thing is revenue from anticipated developments. A great example from that is if we are currently have planned a regional furniture store, for example, revenue would not be forecasted in this long-range forecast until the development is in the ground and it is producing revenue. It's a budgeting best practice, and it's the responsible thing we need to do to ensure that the revenues are certain. Expenses related to MOUs. We assume the current MOUs in place and the expenses related to that. If there's any anticipated changes to those MOUs, we wait until those are approved. And finally, we try to put a little bit of realism on this forecast. The budget that we give departments is the limit, is the legal limit for the departments. So what we do in order to make the forecast realistic is we assume that we will end up at 95% of the total budget that's appropriated each year. Next slide, please. Thank you. Today, what you're going to see is we're going to do a comparison to what was forecasted in November rolled forward to what we're forecasting this evening. There's several notable changes I'd like to highlight. Mayor and Council, overall, this forecast is more optimistic. We've seen revenues across all sectors increase. The economists that we use to project our revenues are not projecting a recession at this point, so we rely heavily on them when we run their we run the assumptions through our models. State shared revenues again are expected to increase. We've seen a pretty significant rise in state shared revenues, and there's no information on the horizon that tells us any different, that they're going to go down. Inflation and worker shortage, those are always things that we need to watch out for. We have seen inflation. Inflation has a negative impact on our forecast, so it's up to us to watch that closely. Finally, we're going to talk about the accelerated need to move to the Tempe Municipal Operations Center, and really what the idea behind that, and Mark and I went into a great deal of detail in December, is to accommodate the traffic operations yard and the priest yard. So next slide. Great, thanks. What you see here, Mayor and Council, is the November 2021 forecast. As you know, we were fairly bullish back in November 2021, and in a couple of slides I'll show you that we are equally as bullish moving forward. Call out a couple things. There's been some discussion around the available new funding. Back in November, we had estimated amount of new funding for recurring supplementals set at $6 million. This is to enhance services or add programs that it's up to the council. We had $1 million estimated for one-time supplementals, and we had a CIP PAYGO amount of about $19.7 million. Again, this is what was included in the November 2021 forecast. So next slide, Jason. Again, revenue projections have improved. The the FY21 department reductions, federal funds and capital, moving of capital improvement cash into the general fund have bolstered fund balance. And I'll explain that a little bit when I get to the next slide. Our fund balance does remain above policy within the forecast period. And what we will do is supplemental budget proposals will be evaluated, and really we will focus on the council start tool to set the priorities for that. And of course, we will bring it back for council consideration. You're going to see increased CIP PAYGO. I'll talk a little bit about that on the next slide, and the reason we set it where it was at. So next slide. Great, thanks, Jason. So here it is. Here's the February 2022 forecast as we sit today, and I'd like to spend a little bit of time on this if I can. I'd like to start with the unassigned fund balance, and essentially what the unassigned fund balance is, that's our savings account, that's our cushion. And as you can see, in fiscal year 2021, we ended with about $140 million unassigned fund balance, or about 57% of revenue, which is well above our policy. The one thing that I would, pardon me, the one thing I would like to call out is there were several items that caused that fund balance to go up and end where it was at June 30, 2021. The first is about $22 million in CARES Act funding. That was one-time revenues that we received, and that caused an increase in the fund balance. The second, as I mentioned earlier, is staff, Ken Jones, Mark Day. We went through when the pandemic was ramping up, and what we wanted to do is conservatively ensure that the general fund was stable. And what we did is we took a look at the CIP funds, all the CIP funds that were available, and we actually identified about $12 million in CIP funding that we could move to the general fund, again, to ensure we were stable. And finally, in the spring of 2020, for the fiscal 2021 budget year, departments went through a budget cutting exercise, and we reduced approximately $10 million in recurring operating budgets. And so those together were about $44 million of cuts that were made and one-time monies that went into the general fund. The one thing that I do want to say is back in 2020 in the spring, when we were making departmental cuts, we had no idea what the impact of the pandemic was going to be. And thankfully, we went through and took really aggressive and responsible actions. I was very impressed, being fairly new back to the city, that we did those steps. And so, you know, hats off to the mayor and council in 2020 for being responsible that way. So what you'll see in this forecast, really what it does is it says, do we have ample revenues to support the expenditures that we foresee over the 5-year period? And what we do is, when we're stable over the 5-year period, then we turn our focus to fiscal 22-23. That's the year that we're budgeting for. And so I'd like to just look at a couple things on this slide. One of the things that we do is determine that our initial estimated surplus or deficit each year is manageable. And as you can see, going in the out years in fiscal 24-25 and 25-26, the amount of deficit or surplus is fairly low compared to about $300 million of revenues. So it's manageable. And then what's included in our expenditures, that's the next thing, because really what this does, and kind of the last piece of value that a forecast does, is it frames on the amount of available funding that we can afford for the upcoming fiscal year to entertain budget supplementals and additional council priorities. So I'll start with, I'm looking at the fiscal 22-23 column and the approved supplementals number, that $3.7 million. As you know, back in the spring of 2020, departments responsibly reduced their budget. Currently, there's about $3.7 million remaining of remaining of departmental budget recuts that weren't restored. That $3.7 million is assumed to be restored in this model. Again, of course, it's council discretion. I'm just telling you what's assumed in this model. The amount of available new funding. As I stated a little bit earlier, we had about $44 million of I'll call it one-time cuts and revenues that we've received. That's the CARES Act money, the money we moved in from the CIP, and the departmental cuts. That was about $44 million. So what we're doing is we are viewing that as one-time additions to our fund balance. So what you'll see in fiscal 22-23 and 23-24, it allows us to be fairly aggressive on the amount of CIP PAYGO funding that we use for projects. And really what that does is that accomplishes a couple of things. That allows us to move the traffic ops yard with very minimal impact on the current CIP projects in this year's CIP. So basically what it does, it provides us flexibility within our CIP. The next thing that I'll highlight is the estimated recurring supplementals. What we have done is we have estimated that we can entertain about $13 million in supplemental requests that we would bring back to council, prioritize for council to consider to move in the general fund. And finally, we've estimated about $5 million in one-time supplementals, quite a bit of capacity for council to consider one-time supplemental requests. So again, I'm fairly optimistic that we're in a good place. We're in a better place than we were in November 2021. We anticipated a little bit, but we had to wait and see if the revenues, if we felt that they were going to stick. And at this point, and looking to our outside economists, we feel that the revenues are going to stick. And Mayor, with that, I'd like to pause before we get on to the other funds and certainly entertain any questions. We're not looking for specific direction tonight. This is more of an FYI to frame the 22-23 budget that we'll bring back.
Great. Thank you so much, Tom. Really appreciate it. Great presentation. So council, as Tom is saying, he's not looking for any direct action to be taken, but obviously if there are any comments or questions or feedback that you have, this would be a good time to chime in.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Arredondo Savage, and then I'll go to Councilmember Adams.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Hey, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Tom, very much. I'm not sure if this is the right place. I know you still have a little bit more of your presentation to go, right? Tom, did I get that? Okay. So
That's correct.
just one of the things, I guess, like I said, I'm not sure if this is the right place to say it, but one of the things I really want to ensure as we move through, and I have a lot of faith in the system and the supplementary process and our departments. I think they do a really phenomenal job. So thank you to everybody, first and foremost, for doing that. But the one thing I really want to just kind of make sure I am very comfortable with, and something that we've been talking about for a couple of years, is all of those frozen positions. I really want to understand and make sure that those positions that are frozen and are not being filled, they are not being filled because that is the desire of the department director. So if that's the case, that's totally fine. But for me, I'm going to really look at ensure that we get our departments back to where they need to be, where we would like them to be, and where they were at the very least, if not more advanced than that. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I know that's been a discussion that we've talked about over these years, and it's been really challenging. So I just know, talking with a couple of departments and asking some questions, that there are still frozen positions, and I just really want to ensure that we are addressing them to the best of our ability. So thank you, Tom. Really do appreciate you, as always. And it's nice to see that, you know, the picture is a little bit brighter than it's been. So thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Arredondo Savage. Next up, Councilmember Adams.
Yes, I'm glad Councilmember Arredondo Savage stated that about the frozen positions. That is also a concern of mine. I really feel like we've been balancing a lot of the budget, the hard times on our employees. And I think we need to get it so employees aren't doing 2 and 3 jobs themselves, because there's no way that they don't get burnt out, and there's no way they can give the customer service, which is so important to me, true, really good customer service to our residents. So that's something that I really want us to look at. I direct the city manager to look at that. And also, I'm very concerned about the positions that are still frozen in the police department. And we need to get our police fully staffed. And that has not been happening. And I'm getting a lot of complaints out there from the residents. And it just, we need to fix that. Furthermore, I just want to ask, I know you said that some projects could be done faster as a result of the surplus. And I'm wondering if Clark Park, a pool and recreational center, is on that list, Tom?
Great. Thank you, Councilmember, Mayor, members of the council. Clark Park operating costs are in this forecast. Assumed, I don't have the dollar amounts, but they are assumed to be in the forecast and funded. That's just the assumption.
Okay, and is it going to happen faster as a result of our funding, or what is the time frame?
Yeah, Mayor, members of the council, I'll have to, I may have to defer that question. I'm not quite sure when it's due to start operations. I know that it's dependent upon when it's complete. And as far as I know, there's no delay in getting it up and operating.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate it. It's nice to have you, Tom, back at our city. So thanks for the presentation and really great news about our budget. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Wonderful. Thank you, Councilmember Adams. Do I have any other council members? Any additional comments or questions for Tom?
So, Mayor, what I'd like to do, and if there's no other council members, go ahead and turn it over to Mark. We do have to run through the other funds. I think it'll be fairly quick. It's equally as good in the other funds.
Well, we like good news over here, Tom, so perfect.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Mark Day, Municipal Budget Director. Thank you, Tom. So if we can, Jason, next slide, please. Okay, so in addition to the general fund, we also do long-range forecasting on the city's other major operating funds. So I'll start with the 4 enterprise funds. Water wastewater fund, that fund is stable and assumes a planned drawdown of fund balance in a sustainable manner that includes pay-as-you-go or cash funding of CIP projects. The next enterprise fund, solid waste. The approved rate increases effective January of 22, as well as future planned rate increases have stabilized this fund. The next would be the golf fund. So revenues are projected to decline slightly next fiscal year as other recreational opportunities become available post-pandemic, but then we're anticipating they will then begin modest increases. The good news with this fund is that the fund balance deficit is projected to be eliminated next fiscal year and return back to the normal fund balance policy level. And then the fourth enterprise fund that we have is the Emergency Medical Transportation or Ambulance Fund. This fund is scheduled to add a fifth and sixth ambulance company in February of 22, and our revenue and expenses are in line with projections. Next slide, please. So in addition to the enterprise funds, we also have 3 special revenue funds where the majority of the revenue in those funds are restricted for specific purposes. So in the transit fund, with the projected growth in transit sales tax, as well as the $37.5 million in federal funds received last fiscal year and scheduled this fiscal year, they have really helped to stabilize this fund. The forecast does assume controlled growth in bus and rail operation contracts with Valley Metro, and we also have included the estimated streetcar operating costs into the forecast model. The next one is transportation or HERF. So the latest forecast from Arizona Department of Transportation projects modest growth in HERF revenue. So this is a state shared revenue fund. So any future amounts are obviously subject to legislation changes. And then last, we have the Arts and Culture Fund. So projected growth in arts and cultural tax have provided for a stable fund. Facility and program revenue is anticipated to gradually return to pre-pandemic levels over the next few years. Next slide, please. So just a little update on the American Rescue Plan Act or ARPA funds. So we have been operating under interim rules issued by the Treasury, and they finally, in January of this year, issued the final rule on the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds. So that is the portion of the act that provided ARPA funding to states, cities, and towns. So the final rules, there was no substantive changes from the interim rule. If anything, it loosened some of the restrictions and reporting requirements. Just as a reminder, the city of Tempe is scheduled to receive $46 million in ARPA funds, with one half already received, and then the next half coming in the spring of this year. We did hire Whit O'Brien's to help the city consult with us on the eligible use of the ARPA funds, as well as help us with the compliance and reporting requirements. And then as we presented at the December 16th work study session, the relocation of the police and traffic operations yards will require the use of approximately $40 million in ARPA funds. So these funds are currently scheduled to fund other CIP projects in the current adopted CIP. So we're going to have to adjust that CIP. So when we come back on March 24th with the initial recommended CIP, we will present our proposed funding for the TMOC location, as well as the adjustments to projects currently scheduled to utilize the ARPA funding. Next slide, please. And with that, Tom and I would be glad to answer any questions that the mayor and council may have.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark. Appreciate it. Anyone from council, any comments or questions or feedback for Mark or Tom? Scan my list here. Looks like I'm not seeing anything at the moment. Last chance. Any comments or questions, council? Mark, you have pulled it off very successfully. There are no comments or questions from council. So,
right.
Well done. Well done.
All right. Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you so much. Tom, anything else you need from us before we close out this item?
No, sir. I appreciate the comments, and I did get a ping from Sean Wagner that Clark Park Pool is expected to be completed in the summer of 2023, and it's on track.
There you go, Councilmember Adams. Perfect. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Mark. All right. Next up, we're going to go here at item 2E, which is 2022 Tribal Community Gaming Grant Proposals. And I'm going to bring up Marge Zilla, our Government Relations Officer.
Mayor, council members, I'm Marge Zilla, Government Relations Officer for the city. In item 2E, you'll find for your review the city's proposed tribal community grant applications. As you know, Arizona state statute requires tribal communities to contribute 12% of annual gaming proceeds to local governments for public benefit purposes. Council identified the city's 5 strategic priorities, and staff used this direction to identify projects and programs that connect with the performance measures that drive these priorities. These include projects in areas such as human services, emergency response, historic preservation, and parks. And these projects have also been evaluated for initial and ongoing operating, maintenance, and capital costs. You will see the council priority and the performance measure noted in the rightmost columns of attachment A for each individual proposal. The 18 proposals in the attachment total approximately $2.3 million. As you all know, none of the funding is guaranteed, and following this meeting, staff will work on aligning the internal proposed projects with individual tribal council priorities. Also to note, COVID has had an effect on gaming operations, and our tribal community partners have let us know that this has affected forecasting of revenues and the available grant funds. Following this meeting and any discussion, staff will integrate council direction into resolutions for the respective tribes, and then those resolutions will come back before you, before council, for approval at the next regular council meeting. After those are approved, those resolutions will accompany the application materials as needed to meet the requirements of individual tribal communities, and we will look forward to hearing about any awards, and that would likely be in fall of this year. And I'm available for any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Marge. Really appreciate it. Council, any comments or questions for Marge? Marge, I've got to say, you've done it once again. It's almost like you beat your own time every time you come up for a presentation. So great job. Thank you so much for all that you do. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. That means next up we have the last item here, which is item 2G, Public Involvement Plan for the Preparation of General Plan 2050. Can you believe we're already at General Plan 2050? And I see Ryan LeVake, and I know Shauna and Mbika are also here as well. So I see Ryan. Go for it.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. I'm going to load up the PowerPoint. One second. Great. You see full screen?
Yes, Ryan, we can see it.
Okay, great. Thank you. This is the Public Involvement Plan for the Preparation of General Plan 2050. So thank you. This evening tonight, we've got Shauna Warner with us from Neighborhood Services, as well as Mbika Adhikari, who's our project lead for the request. We are kicking off the General Plan 2050 process. City Council guidance and looking for City Council guidance on the draft Public Involvement Plan, which is the first step in this process and endeavor. This item closely aligns with strong community connections in item 2.15 and achieving ratings of very satisfied with the feeling of invited and welcome to participate in the city decision-making processes. You'll see on the slide on your right-hand side is the proposed General Plan 2050 branding, which is described as Tempe Tomorrow. In the photo, you've got images of new and old buildings in Tempe. We've got neighborhoods, the environment, and the transit elements of transportation, walkability, and bicycling. And now we'll go over the General Plan 2050 preparation process. So for the viewer audience that may not know what a general plan is, the General Plan 2050 is a guiding document that helps foster and maintain sustainable and livable environment for our community. We've got a general plan vision to help make Tempe more livable, sustainable, resilient, and equitable for all. The general plan is also mandated by our Arizona state statutes. It requires a major update, every decennial update for every 10 years. That update is approved by council and then ratified by the voters. So in this process also we have the mandate requirement of a public involvement plan, and that's why we're presenting this information to you tonight. There are several elements within the general plan. Most familiar are the land use and protected land use elements of the general plan. We also have authority, economic development, circulation, transportation, and environment. And there's an opportunity to include additional elements such as walkability, climate change, and public health. The general plan 2040 is what the current general plan is today. That was adopted back with City Council back in December 2013 and approved by the voters in May of 2014. So a similar timeline will need to be created for this process as we kick off. Well, for the general plan adoption period, we'll need to have an adoption before December of 2023 and then ratified by the voters before May of 2024, which is a City Council election year. And now I'll have Shauna Warner go over the public involvement plan for you all.
Thank you, Ryan, and good evening, Mayor and Council. So as Ryan noted, the first step in our general plan process is the adoption of a public involvement plan, a draft of which was included in your meeting materials. This plan is a high-level document. It outlines how our community will be engaged in developing the revisions to our general plan. And for the plan, we have an overarching goal of considering equity and inclusiveness in the process. And next slide, please. A key to that plan will be seeking public input in a variety of ways. We'll be utilizing neighborhood walking tours, discussions led by youth and community partners, online conversations, public meetings, surveys, and more. The plan provides a general overview of how our community can be involved, and then we'll get into specific engagement opportunities later on in the process and use a variety of direct outreach and online tools to keep our community members engaged and also involved in what we're doing. Next slide, please. And then another piece of the public involvement plan includes a technical working group and a community working group. The technical one is made up of staff and related boards and commissions. And then our community working group is comprised of representatives from our community. And that helps us guide developing the general plan that reflects the community's vision. Next slide, please. So again, this is just the first step in the process. You're going to be hearing frequently from us over the next 2 years. This first phase is just setting up those processes so we're ready for the next phase, which is when we're going to go out and heavily engage with our community. And then our third and final phase will include a draft plan that will be taken through a public hearing and adoption process in preparation for the vote. And then I'll turn it back over to Ryan.
Great. Thank you, Shauna. So our next steps. In this process, we'll also be looking to form the community working group as well as the technical advisory group, which primarily consists of boards and commission members. And then we'll also have internal departmental representatives from staff team of all departments that'll be involved in this process. And for finalization, we're looking for adoption of the public involvement plan. That item will come before your next regular council meeting on March 3rd. And then we'll continue to finalize the general plan branding and marketing materials. I'd just like to point out and thank you. This is our team, core team that's working on the general plan from both planning division and neighborhood services. We also have a large extended team of additional resources that all city involvement as well as department representation is involved in this process. So with that, we look for city council guidance and input on this draft public involvement plan, as well as the formation of the working groups. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Shauna. Really appreciate it. Councilmember Cubie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Is it possible on the planning team to maybe include a representative from the public, perhaps maybe neighborhood, our neighborhood advisory commission?
Yes, I believe they are on the list of the involvement for them. And if there's additional seats too, we can invite more as well.
Mhm. And also, I had the honor last week or a few weeks ago of hosting James Rojas and John Camp in a discussion of their new book called Dream, Play, Build. I think Shauna was even on the call. I think I saw your name. I saw a number of Tempe folks. And they have a sort of a new way of community engagement. Also, it often involves art and creative expression and blocks and building, less the dots, the little post-it note dots and things, and more creative expression. And while it may be more suited, because I'm not an expert in this, it may be more suited to specific community development projects and maybe not the whole span of a general plan, which I realize is highly complex and has to be broken down. I wonder if there's any, not just that book, but I'm wondering in the 10 years since we've done a community, we've done a general plan, if there are any new ideas of community engagement that you guys would like to explore and use to engage people in a deeper, more fun way.
Yeah, we'd be happy to take a look at it.
And I can just add, Councilmember QB, thank you. Yeah, I was able to join and it was a great workshop. We do have done a lot in the last 10 years that's now different in engagement, just similar to what was talked about in the webinar. I know a couple of you were able to join us at our transportation open house, but we did kind of have an activity there where our consultants as well as our arts engagement staff always help us and kind of they had a street out and stickers where they could kind of place and design their own street. So we are looking at a variety of ways to engage additional residents. And then we also partner with a lot of our nonprofits. For example, Rail CDC has been helping us with some of our neighborhoods along Apache. And, sometimes that neighbor to neighbor or even kind of trusted partner always can help as well with some of our engagement. So we'll be doing all that and keep you informed as we go along with some of those more specifics as we get into the process.
And I know this might be determined by what's happening with COVID and such, but would it be possible to offer childcare so we can encourage those who may have barriers in attending to attend? And then I'll close that off. Thanks so much for listening to those comments or questions.
Sounds good. No, thank you, Councilmember QB. Let me look to.
Can I have an answer or?
Yes. I'm sorry. That's Shauna and Ryan first.
Are we considering, childcare, offering those kind of helps to attendance and to reduce barriers to attending?
Yes, so we've been working with our Equity in Action Coalition, and we have an equity framework that we're testing currently that would be implemented for additional ways that we do engagement. And so that is one of the identified means. And so we would be planning that for hopefully for in person when we can do that. So yes.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Let me go next to Councilmember Garland.
Hi, thank you, Mayor. I just want to say when I was running for office, I read the 2040 plan just to try to learn as much as I could about the city. And it was so incredibly detailed. So now to look at being a part of the process and how you do it, I have to say, I absolutely love all of the outreach that you do to the community. I think it's incredibly important that we do this, but I just love the timeline that you set up and the community outreach that, really making sure that everybody has an opportunity to have an opinion and be able to share that with us. So I just want to tell you guys, thank you so much for organizing this. And I can't wait to see the plan as it goes through. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Garland. Any of the council members, any comments or questions? Hearing none, thank you so much. Looking forward to this very thorough presentation and just, looking forward to the formation of all the working groups for General Plan 2050. Once again, I can't believe the last one was in 2013, that it was that long ago. But I mean, I guess it's that time again, and we got a great team putting it together. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, we have item number 3, call to the audience for committee of the whole items. There are no items ready for city council direction. Let's see. And I should actually ask really quickly too, Madam Clerk, are there any more comment cards or people wishing to speak?
Mayor, it does look like we have Richard Bell, and he had wanted to speak on item 2F, the climate action plan. We have nobody for the cow items.
Okay, let's go to Mr. Bell if he's available.
Go ahead,
Am
Mr.
I
Bell.
unmuted? Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I love living in Tempe. Although I'm retired, I volunteer for St. Vincent de Paul and its homeless shelter, as well as the Community Climate Livability Project. I also work to help my neighbors get shade trees planted. I don't want to be forced to give this up and the friends I've made to flee unlivable heat waves causing utility overloads. I want my city to do its part to stem global heating with timely and decisive action to shift away from emitting greenhouse gases. I want my city also to mitigate the heat island and build clean energy backup to utilities. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Bell. Really appreciate it. All right, going here to item number 4A. Committee of the whole items ready for City Council direction to status update. There are none. I've next asked, though, if there are any council members that would like to provide an update regarding the following council committees. And item 4B, we have the Human Services and Community Safety Committee, Sustainable and Livable Communities, and Workforce Readiness and Economic Vitality. Any council members wish to provide an update on any of those committees? Vice Mayor Keating.
Thank you, Mayor. The Workforce Readiness and Economic Vitality Committee is just crushing it. That's my update. Thank you.
I have no doubt. Thank you, Vice Mayor. Any other council members, any updates on their committees?
Oh, Mr. Mayor, just that our Sustainable and Livable Communities Committee, we're meeting on Wednesday, the 23rd, and really would relish and entertain a lot of public comment. We're going to be hearing from John Penry and the folks at Broadmoor about their plans, so we're excited for that.
Excellent. Thank you, Councilmember Cubie. Any other updates on the council committees from council members? All right, hearing none. The next item on the agenda is future agenda items. Council members may request that an agenda item be added to a future issue review session. In accordance with the Arizona Open Meeting Law, there should be no discussion on the item other than to clarify the request. Does any member of the council have any future agenda items they'd like added? Councilmember Cubie?
Yes, well, actually, I was thinking with the Double Butte Cemetery, could we have a presentation just sort of detailing what the needs are for the cemetery? And we can pick out your future plot, Mr. Mayor.
Oh my God, you went there. I'm gonna go check my life insurance policy after this meeting. Mr. City Manager, would that be okay to get an update on that?
Happy to provide an update. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Councilmember Cubie, we can go look for my plot together. So, let's see, Vice Mayor Keating.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I was planning on having you buried at the 50-yard line of the big house, but I know you're not much of a sports fan. I just wanted Michigan State to spike the ball on you once a year. No, but I would actually like an update from PD or maybe staff about our efforts. One of the working groups that I led before we moved to the committee system, that's an issue that's very important to me, is human and sex trafficking prevention and mitigation. You know, as we are coming into the Super Bowl being here next year, there's talk, I think the Final Four is going to be here 2 years from now, and you know, there's possibilities of more bigger events coming to the city. We know that you know, sex tourism is a thing that happens around these big events. I just want to make sure Tempe is doing everything we possibly can to make sure that it doesn't happen in our city. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Vice Mayor Keating. I guess, Mr. City Manager, I'll ask again, can we have that agendized for a future meeting?
Yes, absolutely.
Great. All right. Thank you so much. Any other council members, any future agenda items? Hearing none. I have one. And I believe, Madam Clerk, I talked with you about this, I believe, a few days ago, if I'm remembering correctly. I could be making this up, though. I would love a kind of an update and a presentation. I know I talked to Ryan LeVake about our adaptive reuse program. I know that I believe that was put into effect back in 2014 or 2015. I remember when I was in my second term on council, but I know I've talked to some folks in the development community recently who've talked about the need for possibly some updates to happen to this already great program. And so I wanted to see if we could have a presentation about that and see what we might want to do to update it to make sure we're getting as many adaptive reuse projects as possible. I think that it kind of got on my mind with the Hayden Flour Mill negotiations we approved last week, that whatever we can do to save a lot of our older and historic buildings in the city and kind of create present day uses, I think that would be a huge boon for the city. So if we could just have that agenda as Madam Clerk for a future meeting.
Mayor, I believe that's already been scheduled. I'll get the date ready for you.
Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you.
Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember Navarro.
Yeah, just a question. We brought it up in the meeting. Have we had a discussion, or are we getting a presentation on just the downtown area maintenance of right-of-way streetscape within the downtown area?
I think
we've had many in the past, but is there something of a discussion with a plan going forward?
I was going to say, thank you for that question, Councilmember Navarro. I believe either Madam Clerk or Mr. City Manager, I believe Marilyn DeRose is scheduled to come forward in the next few weeks to give that presentation, but I want to double check to make sure that's accurate.
Hey,
Yes,
Mayor, this is Robin, and just really quick, actually, in our Rev committee, which, the best committee, Randy and I actually have that on, have had a conversation, and, would love to be able to talk about that a little bit more. And I do believe it's coming up and through our work, our working group too. So we can definitely kind of push that forward and make sure that's something that gets heard sooner than later.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you, Councilmember Arredondo Savage. So I was going to say, Councilmember Navarro, are you good with Councilmember Arredondo Savage and Vice Mayor Keating kind of working together to get that agendized for an upcoming meeting?
I thought they were killing it, so I was hoping that they would have it for next meeting.
I'm gonna let Councilmember Arredondo Savage take that one.
Got it.
You can't believe anything a politician says, Joel.
This is true.
It's a fair point.
I believe he said they were crushing it, actually. I don't think he said killing, but.
Thank you, City Manager.
There you go again, Mr.
No
Well, you know what? We're crushing it and killing it at the same time. So there. All right.
Oh, I love it. All right, Council, any other future agenda items?
I thought of another one.
Oh, yes, Councilmember Keating.
Before I leave this council, we had an ADU ordinance, and we improved and expanded upon ADU accessibility and guest houses. I was wondering, and it doesn't have to be actually a work study or IRS, but even maybe at Friday Pack, but just learned about, have people picked up on it? Are there being developed? Are there more guest houses being developed to help relieve some of the stresses that we have for affordable housing for people's, in their backyard, for their family, or whether they're renting in certain areas where it's historically, and it's characteristic of the neighborhood to have them? Are they expanding? So just sort of overview, did that ordinance do anything? Because if not, maybe we should take a look at it and try and improve upon it.
Sounds good. Councilmember Cupid, maybe I'll look to Ryan LeVake to sort of see if we can get a presentation at an upcoming meeting about the sort of new rules we passed regarding accessory dwelling units known as ADUs, and whether or not people in our community are taking advantage of them in a good way.
Much better said, Mr. Mayor.
Or I guess just want to get confirmation. I guess maybe Madam Clerk, can we have that scheduled for an upcoming meeting?
Or a Friday packet. I'll put out an announcement to staff tomorrow via Andrew.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Any other agenda items? All right, I'll close that part of the discussion. The next item on the agenda is mayor's announcements, city manager's announcements. I don't have any announcements this evening. Mr. City Manager, do you have any announcements?
No announcements. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, sounds good. Item number 7 is the next meeting date, which is scheduled for March 24th, 2022. We're going to go ahead and adjourn this meeting at 6:36 p.m. Council, let's try to get, we have an executive session to do. Let's try to get in the room by 6:40. So take a couple minutes.